Hello, I'm Jill Webb and I'd like to talk to you today about risk assessment. Many of you will know that I work with many small businesses and a lot of not-for-profit organisations, and quite a few of them are quite concerned about the recent advice from the government. Jill, I only run a small business, just me and my wife here usually, and then the customers in and out. I've never done a risk assessment before, if I'm honest. Or somebody else saying to me, I'm the voluntary chair of a committee, trustees of a charity. We're only a tiny charity. We've never had to sort of work with this sort of thing before. Where do I start? So the idea of this short clip is to get you going, because most things are harder until we get started. There are lots of good materials you can use for risk assessments, and I will be signposting you to some of those at the end of the clip. But I just want to start you now with a thought process that might help. I find the easiest way to think about risk is to think about three key questions. So the first question is, what could go wrong? The second question is, what would the impact be? And the third question is, how can we reduce this risk? So let me give you an example. What could go wrong? Staff and service users could fail to socially isolate. That's probably a big concern that we've all got. They could either fail to socially isolate or be unable to. What would the impact be? The impact of people not socially isolating is that the infection risk increases. And how can we reduce the risk? This can be where people get really tied up, and the best way to do this is to take a step back and think through the activity or the workplace a step at a time. So if you imagine your workplace and people arriving there, if you imagine the activity you're trying to run, people arrive there, how do they get there? How could you reduce the risk there? I've heard of some really innovative ideas, including offices beginning to work a shift system, which has actually worked very well for work-life balance for some of their staff. I've heard of people using different entrances and exits. You have to wait in the car park until the entrance is free. Lots of different ideas. So start from there. Work through what happens when people get in the door. Think through what happens during lunch times, visits to the toilet, all that sort of thing, but break it down a step at a time. And beginning to think through that will help you see for each stage how you can reduce that risk. And every time we reduce a risk, we reduce the risk of infection. So it's really worthwhile to sit and do that in some detail. You'll want to write this down to cover yourself and your director or your board of trustees. So I can provide some templates for that if you contact me, or I would recommend my colleague Steve Booth of SEB Training. Many of you will know we work closely together, and Steve is an absolute expert in this field and be able to give you more advice and guidance. So thank you very much, and I hope that's been a useful starter.